Welcome, friends, to our fourth and final meeting on the philosophy of Yeshayahu Leibowitz. Yeshayahu Leibowitz, Audacious Israeli Philosophy. Our concluding topic is the state of Israel. Where are we headed? These are very difficult times, and it is easy to despair. I promise, however, that I shall try to end this series of talks on an upbeat note. First, let us pray for the liberation of our hostages still suffering in Gaza. Let's look at the first text. We have Zionism is not an ideology. Leibowitz is often asked, what is the ideology of Zionism? Is it a capitalist ideology, a socialist ideology, egalitarian ideology, a nationalist ideology? What kind of ideology is it? Is it right? Is it left? Is it centrist? What kind of ideology is Zionism? And Leibowitz's answer is simple. It's not an ideology. Remember, Leibowitz always tries to give simple definitions. Simple definitions. What is Judaism? The mitzvot ma'asiyot, the practical commandments. He doesn't say that Judaism is a particular kind of philosophy or theology or ethics. No, it's the mitzvot ma'asiyot. That's what defines Judaism. And what defines Zionism? Zionism is many different ideologies, but not one of those ideologies defines Zionism. Some Zionists are capitalists, some Zionists are socialists, some Zionists are rightist, some Zionists are leftist, some Zionists are middle of the roaders. They're all different kinds of Zionists. They have all different kinds of Zionist ideologies. Some are religious, some are secular, some are anti-religious. Different kinds of Zionisms. Zionism is not an ideology. What is it? It is a complex of activities undertaken to restore independence to the Jewish nation in its own land. That's what Zionism is. It's the effort which took different forms and had different kinds of thrusts to it to restore independence to the Jewish nation in the land of Israel, in Zion. That's what Zionism is. Whether those who were doing it sometimes thought it would be good to have a capitalist society, or it would be good to have a socialist society. Those are questions which do not touch the core of what Zionism is. The core of what Zionism is the restoration of independence to the Jewish nation in its own land. It is nothing more. It offers no solution to the essential problem of the Jewish people. Problem of the Jewish people, that of the continuity of its historic, spiritual, and cultural being. Right? The Jewish people as a nation, we have certain problems. Right? For example, most Jews do not observe the mitzvot ma'asiyot today. Most Jews do not observe those practical commandments which constitute Judaism. How can Judaism continue when most Jews are not observing the commandments? How can Judaism continue when in the state of Israel, when a large majority of the population is not Jewish, and when we are ruling over many peoples who are not interested in our rule? The Jewish nation has many kinds of problems, but Zionism is not an answer to those problems. The problems that arose in Judaism in modernity with the emancipation, all these problems are not solved by Zionism. Zionism is simply a framework. It's independence. It offers no solution to the essential problem of the Jewish people, that of the continuity of its historic, spiritual, and cultural being. Right? What does he mean by this? He means that the historical, spiritual, empirical Jewish people is the people who observe the commandments. Today, you can't say that the Jews are any more the people who observe the commandments, because most Jews do not observe the commandments. What about what is going to be the future of the Jewish people? Zionism doesn't give us an answer to that. The state of Israel doesn't give us an answer, but it gives us a framework in which to pursue these problems and to argue for different ways of solving them. It offers no solution. Zionism offers no solution to the essential problem of the Jewish people, that of the continuity of its historic, spiritual, and cultural being. Therefore, says Leibowitz, I am not disappointed with Zionism. Zionism has been very successful as far as I am concerned. I am not disappointed with Zionism. He may have been disappointed with certain Zionists, right? But he wasn't disappointed with Zionism because I never imagined that it would provide a solution to the problems of the Jewish people. I wanted Zionism to be one thing, to provide a framework, to provide Jewish independence. Let's move on to text number 2. I wish to present myself, he says, continuing the same line of thought, as a Jew who has not at all been disappointed by the state of Israel. Right? This is something Leibowitz emphasized again and again. He's completely satisfied, completely happy with the state of Israel. The state of Israel has fulfilled everything he expected it to fulfill. It has fulfilled for him everything that from the dawn of his childhood he had sought in its establishment. It seems to me, Leibowitz said, as far as he can remember what he was thinking when he was a child, that from the day I made up my mind to be a Zionist, the meaning of Zionism for me was simply that Jews want no longer to be under the rule of the Gentiles, under the Goyim, right? Nimas lanu shilton hagoyim. That's how Leibowitz put it. We're fed up with being ruled by the Gentiles. The demand for liberation from the subjugation, the shi'abud of the Gentiles, was fulfilled by the state of Israel. What is Zionism? We saw in our discussion of Kibbutz that Leibowitz emphasized that in the diaspora, the Jews are politically impotent. And since the Jews are politically impotent, they are not really able to test Jewish values. They're not able to test the values of Torah or mitzvot because they don't have the political power. In the diaspora, we do not have the political power to enforce, to use political power. We don't have political power. Therefore, this impotence means that we are not being tested. The Jews are not being tested in the diaspora. Zionism is the test, the nisayon of the Jewish people. What is it? It's simply to free oneself of the shi'abud of the Gentiles and to take on responsibility. And this was fulfilled entirely by the state of Israel. The state of Israel, the establishment of the state of Israel, Jewish independence, gave Jews independence, gave Jews responsibility. And that's what Leibowitz wanted, national responsibility. Once in the 1980s, I heard someone ask Leibowitz, what is a Zionist? And he answered, a Zionist is an engineer who prefers to build his bridge over the Yarkon and not over the Mississippi. Right? That's what a Zionist is. Someone who wants to be part of Jewish independence in the land of Israel, wants to be part of this. We don't know anything about that engineer's ideology, whether the engineer was a capitalist or a socialist, or whether he voted for right-wing parties or left-wing parties. What makes him a Zionist? That he wants to build his bridge over the Yarkon and not over the Mississippi. He wants to be part of independence of the Jewish people in the land of Israel. Next text. It seems to me, says Leibowitz, that it never occurred to me to depend on the state, and by this I mean any state, including the state of Israel, for the realization of values. It's not the job of a state to inculcate values. It's the job of the state to provide a framework. By this I mean any state, including the state of Israel, for the realization of values in the sense of education, culture, morality, and especially religion, namely the Torah and its commandments, Torah u'mitzvot. That's not the job of the state. The idea that the state, i.e., the governmental apparatus, embodies values is the fascist idea in its essence. In the fascist state, values are inculcated by the government, but in a free state, everyone is permitted to pursue his or her own values. the position set down here by Leibowitz, that it seems to me, it never occurred to me to depend on the state, and by this I mean any state, including the state of Israel, for the realization of values in the sense of education, culture, morality, and especially religion, namely the Torah and its commandments. This is the traditional position of religious Zionism, the traditional position of the Mizrahi Party, which was founded in 1902 by Rabbi Reines. What is the official position? Why did Rabbi Reines found the Mizrahi Party? The Mizrahi argued all the time that Zionism is a purely economic political movement. It does not attempt to replace religion. It does not attempt to set down notions about religion. It comes to solve the economic and political problem of the Jewish people, not to take position with regard to religion, with regard to ideology, with regard to culture. What unites all the Jews, said the original Mizrahi Party and Rabbi Jacob Reines, what unites them was the political economic program. And therefore, he said, pious Jews, religious Jews, like members of the Mizrahi Party, could be good Zionists and could follow a leader like Herzl, who was not an observant Jew, because Zionism is not about religion, it's not about cultural values, religious values. Zionism is about economics and politics. It's a political, social, economic movement. And this is basically Leibowitz's position. The position that Leibowitz is presenting when he speaks about what Zionism is the original position of religious Zionism from its foundation in 1902. It should be mentioned that when Rabbi Reines founded the Mizrahi Party in 1902, it was not a question of religious Jews joining the Zionist Party. That's a common misunderstanding, that religious Zionism began when religious Jews joined Zionism. The opposite is the case. The original proto-Zionist movements, such as Chibat Zion, the Lovers of Zion, were largely observant Jews, religious Jews, traditionalist Jews, rabbis. And it was only when Herzl came in and joined the movement that Herzl was able to attract secular Jews to the movement, and most of the Zionist leadership was secular. It was at that time when the religious Jews, who had been there all the time, looked around and saw that they were no longer in the majority, and decided that they had to form a faction called the Mizrahi, which would take care of the needs of the religious Zionists. But it wasn't a question of religious Jews joining the Zionist movement. The religious Jews were there in the proto-Zionist movement, in Chibat Zion, but it was the Mizrahi was founded when those religious Jews who had always been there looked around and noticed that they were now in the minority, and it was necessary to protect their interests. And one of the interests that they wanted to protect was they wanted to stop those secular Jews from taking control of education. They didn't want the secular Jews to set down their view of what Jewish culture was, what Jewish education was supposed to be, and therefore the Mizrahi insisted from the beginning, the religious Zionism insisted from the beginning, that Zionism is an economic and political program, it's not an ideology. And that's the position that Leibowitz holds in his writings on Zionism. Let's move on to the next text. I vehemently oppose the view that Zionism is essentially connected with the idea of a light unto the nations, right? The prophets, Isaiah in particular, spoke all the time about Israel being or legoyim, or hagoyim, a light to the nations. That there's some kind of a vocation or a task of the Jewish people to be a light to the Gentiles, to be a light unto the other nations. I reject the attempts to adorn the Zionist state with a religious aura. Rather than exalt Zionism, when you try to make the Zionist state something religious, you're not exalting Zionism. These efforts devaluate religion, turning it from the service of God, and after all, that's what religion is. It's dat tovat, it's a demanding religion, which is avodat Hashem, the service of God, since these efforts devaluate religion, turning it from the service of God into the fulfillment of human needs and aspirations. What is the meaning of Zionism? Zionism is the expression of our being fed up with being ruled by the Goyim. Nimas lanu shilton hagoyim aleinu. Right? Leibowitz uses this vulgar, common expression, the street expression, Nimas lanu shilton hagoyim aleinu. That's what Zionism is. When he's asked what Zionism is, he doesn't give you some fancy theory or some complicated theory. He doesn't speak in the language of political science or social philosophy. He speaks in the language of the street. Nimas lanu shilton hagoyim. Nimas lanu shilton hagoyim aleinu. We are fed up with the rule of the Goyim. Now, it's interesting that this word that Leibowitz uses, nimas lanu, right? We are fed up, right? We are fed up. It's a vulgar expression, but on the other hand, it's the official political expression that's used in the Bible to indicate deposing political leadership. If we look in the book of Samuel, Samuel 1, chapter 8, and the Lord said unto Samuel, hearken unto the voice of the people, right? Samuel was the judge, and at that time in the period of Samuel, there was no king in Israel. Israel was run by judges, not by any king or any political leader. And the Lord said unto Samuel, hearken unto the voice of the people. The people said to Samuel, we want a king. Enough of this rule by judges. We want a king like all the other nations. We want a king like all the other nations. And God, which means basically that God is not our king anymore. God and his judges are not going to rule us. We want a king to rule us, a flesh and blood king. And the Lord said unto Samuel, hearken unto the voice of the people when they ask you to make a king, to put a king over them. For they have not rejected thee, right? Ma'asu. They have not rejected thee, but they have rejected ma'asu, me, that I should rule, that I should not be king over them. So God is basically saying to Samuel, okay, the people want a king, they want to be like all the other nations. Let them have it, let them have it. But you should know that they're not fed up with you, they're fed up with me. Right? If we translate the language of ma'asu, right? They have not rejected thee, but they have rejected me. They're not fed up with you, Samuel, they are fed up with me. So when the people of Israel wanted to have a king, they wanted to have a king like all the other nations, K'chol Goyim, they were expressing their being fed up with God, and not being fed up with Samuel. So, but we see from this that ma'asu was a technical term that was used in the biblical period for deposing a political leader. And so when Leibowitz uses it in the vulgar sense, Zionism is an expression of our being fed up with being ruled by the nation. Nimas lanu shilton hagoyim aleinu. In fact, Leibowitz is using the same term that was used by God and the prophet Samuel in the book of Samuel. Now, if you're worried by Leibowitz using vulgar language, which as you know he liked to use all the time, Nimas lanu shilton hagoyim aleinu, we're fed up being ruled by the Goyim, and that's what Zionism is. You could look at what Zalman Shazar, who was later president of Israel, but a month before the proclamation of the State of Israel, Zalman Shazar wrote a draft for the declaration of the Israeli Declaration of Independence. Part of his ideas in the draft were eventually incorporated into the Israeli Declaration of Independence. But Shazar, on the 12th of April 1948, wrote himself a draft for the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel. And in this declaration of the state, he explains what Zionism is. And he doesn't say, Nimas lanu shilton hagoyim aleinu. He doesn't say we're fed up with the rule of the Goyim. He says, the measure of our subjugation is full. Mal'ah se'at shi'abudenu. Right? He uses the same word shi'abud, which also is used in the Talmud, or shi'abud galuyot, and Leibowitz uses it all the time of freeing ourselves from the subjugation, the shi'abud of the Gentiles. But here we see that Zalman Shazar, writing in 1948 in this draft of the Declaration of Independence, says the exact same thing that Leibowitz was to say later on, Nimas lanu shilton hagoyim aleinu, but Shazar says it in the most polite and literary Hebrew possible. He says, Mala se'at shi'abudenu. The measure of our subjugation is full. What does it mean? What does Shazar mean in his literary Hebrew when he says the measure of our subjugation is full? He means what Leibowitz said in his street Hebrew, Nimas lanu shilton hagoyim. We're fed up with the rule of the Gentiles. Let's move on to the next text. This is a story. This next story is a story that Leibowitz told millions of times. He liked to repeat this story. And here's how he tells it in this particular text. About 20 years ago, he's talking about approximately in the mid-1950s, around 1955, Leibowitz says, I had a lengthy conversation with David Ben-Gurion. Right? Leibowitz was a critic of Ben-Gurion. He considered Ben-Gurion to be anti-religious and an enemy of religion, an enemy of Torah and mitzvot. About 20 years ago, in 1955, I had a lengthy conversation with David Ben-Gurion, whose attitude toward Judaism, whose negative attitude toward Judaism, you know. And our discussion was about the problem of religion and state. So in 1955, or approximately in 1955, Leibowitz had a long discussion with David Ben-Gurion on the question of religion and state. And Ben-Gurion said, I understand very well why you demand the separation of religion from the state. You want the Jewish religion to return to being an independent factor with which the political authority will have to contend. You want religion to have power. You want religion to be a critic of the government, just as the prophets in the days of the Bible were critics of the king. Right? That's the traditional role of religion in Israel. The traditional role of religion in Israel is not to be the king, but to be the prophet, to criticize the king. And Ben-Gurion says, yes, I know, Leibowitz, why you're in favor of the separation of religion and state, because you want religion to be independent and powerful. You want religion to be in the opposition. You want the Jewish religion to return to being an independent factor with which the political authority will have to contend. Therefore, says Ben-Gurion, I will never agree to the separation of religion from the state. Right? This is a very important thing in the history of Israel, that the Israeli legal position of not separating religion and state was part of Ben-Gurion's doctrine. Ben-Gurion, the idea of keeping religion and state together was not something that was the doctrine of the religious, but it was the doctrine of Ben-Gurion. Ben-Gurion wanted, from a political point of view, that religion would be controlled by the state. You want the Jewish religion to return to being an independent factor with which the political authority will have to attend. You want religion to be an independent critical factor in the state. Therefore, I will never agree to the separation of religion from the state. I want the state to hold religion in the palm of its hand. And then Leibowitz continues, the official Jewish religion in the state of Israel has reconciled itself with this situation in which it is the kept mistress of the secular government. What happens in Israel, writes Leibowitz, and this was from 1955 when this confrontation took place with Ben-Gurion, that religion sees itself in Israel as serving the state. Leibowitz held that the rabbinical authorities in Israel see themselves as clerks of the state, whose job is to serve the state, not to serve Hashem, not to worry about only avodat Hashem, but to be clerks of the state. as he put it, they're like kept mistress, the kept mistress of the secular government. And this is why Leibowitz fought all his life for the separation of religion of state and state. For the sake of religion, religion has to be, in order for religion to be true, in order to really fight the fight of Torah and mitzvot, religion has to be independent, just as the prophets were independent when they criticized the king. Let's move on to the next test. Well, what about political achievements? Are they important, right? We remember last session, I quoted Nechama Leibowitz as saying, among the many names of God, we do not find the name success. Success is not one of the names of God. And here Yeshayahu Leibowitz is saying something similar. Political achievements, political conquests, military victories, none of these are religiously significant. The only thing that's religiously significant is performing the commandments. If you're not performing the mitzvot ma'asiyot, it's not religiously significant. Political achievements, conquests, victories, none of these are religiously significant. Who restored the border of Israel from the entering of Hamat to the Sea of the Arava? Who was the great Israeli general who restored the border of Israel from the entering of Hamat to the Sea of the Arava and recovered Damascus and Hamat, which had belonged to Judah in Israel, expanded the borders of Israel beyond anything that anyone is dreaming of today, right into Damascus, Syria. Those were the days when we had a king who was able to conquer, a military leader who restored the border of Israel from the entering of Hamat to the city of Arava and recovered Damascus and Hamat, which had belonged to Judah in Israel, as is recorded in the second book of Kings, chapter 14. Who was the greatest of warriors and conquerors among the Israelites? And the answer is, was it King David? No. Was it King Solomon? No. Was it King Saul? No. Who was it? Who was the great conqueror? King Jeroboam ben Yoash, who did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. This great conqueror was a man who did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord and departed not from all the sins of Jeroboam ben Nebat, his forefather. What was the religious significance of these enormous conquests about which we know only from 2 verses in the book of Kings? In the second book of Kings, we have 2 verses which tell us about these tremendous conquests of Yerovam ben Yoash. If it weren't for those 2 verses, we wouldn't even know about his tremendous conquests. What was the influence of these tremendous conquests, these great military victories? What was its imprint on the Jewish religion? What was its imprint on the Jewish consciousness? What was its imprint on Jewish history? The answer is nil. From an empirical point of view, and we know that Leibowitz is always saying, what's the empirical point of view? Let's look at the texts. Let's see how many times the texts, let's look inside our Siddur, and see if in Siddur, the prayer book, if it says anything about Yerovam ben Yoash. No, it says nothing, nil. He had no impact at all on the Jewish religion. If it weren't for those 2 verses in the second book of Kings, we wouldn't even know about his amazing accomplishments. From an empirical point of view, they left no mark in the religious consciousness of Israel. Political achievements, conquests, and victories are completely irrelevant. They have no religious significance. From the point of view of Torah, from the point of view of the commandments, their influence is nil. Let's move on to the next text. Right after the 6-Day War, there was a tremendous interest and revival in all things Jewish. People were interested in Jerusalem. They were interested in Jewish culture, Jewish history. People spoke about our religious revival because of the 6-Day War. Indeed, because of the 6-Day War, thousands and thousands of Jews immigrated to the land of Israel. Aliyah became a great thing, the great victories of the Israeli army in the Six-Day War, and the image of Israel as a powerful, independent, brilliant nation led to great aliyah, great immigration from Jews all over the world. People were celebrating the Six-Day War. They were speaking about the great religious revival and the national revival which brought about by the liberation of the Western Wall, Kotel HaMaravi. Leibowitz wrote this article in Haaretz on the 30th, after the Chag HaShavuot holiday, after the holiday of Shavuot, on the 31st of July. And Leibowitz wrote as follows: the abundance of articles on the religious and national significance of the liberation of the Western Wall, on the religious awakening, supposed the great religious awakening after the Six-Day War, and the national unity that were expressed in the pilgrimage, right, Aliyat HaRegel, of masses to the Western Wall on the festival of Shavuot, right, and the festival of Shavuot, which occurred 10 days after the liberation, 10 days after the Six-Day War, there was the holiday of Shavuot, Chag HaShavuot, and multitudes came to Jerusalem to come to the Western Wall, to the Kotel HaMaravi. It occurred 10 days after its liberation, after the liberation of the Kotel, the liberation of the Western Wall. All of this requires a clear response. I'm going to tell you what I think about this, says Leibowitz. Since the wicked king Menashe ben Chizkiyahu erected idols in the temple, right, in the second book of Kings, chapter 21, we read of King Menashe, who erected idols in the Beit HaMikdash, in the temple, and made his son pass through the fire. And since the day that the abomination of desolation, right, the abomination of the shikutz hamishomem, the abomination of desolation, it's a term in the book of Daniel, was placed in the temple. There has been no blasphemy equal to that pilgrimage to the Western Wall of 200,000 Jews in 20,000 vehicles on the festival of Shavuot. Leibowitz was not impressed by all these 20,000 vehicles, all these 200,000 Jews coming to the Western Wall after Shavuot, because they were transgressing the commandments. They were transgressing the mitzvot. They were coming there in their automobiles. They were coming there in transgressing the commandments. This was not for Leibowitz a religious revival, but this was the greatest abomination, the greatest Chilul Hashem since biblical days, since the wicked king Menashe ben Chizkiyahu erected idols in the temple and made his sons pass through the fire. And since the day of the abomination of desolation was placed in the temple, there has been no blasphemy equal to that pilgrimage to the Western Wall, so-called pilgrimage to the Western Wall, of 200,000 Jews in 20,000 vehicles on this festival of Shavuot. It was a desecration of the holiday, not a celebration of the holiday. And now Leibowitz, who had a good sense of humor, and here's our chance to get a taste of his sense of humor, he called his article the discotel. In those days, right, in the days of the period of the Six-Day War, in 1967, the discotheques were very popular. And Leibowitz created this word, discotel. Here is my proposal. The plaza in front of the wall will be renovated as the largest discotheque in the state, right? And it will be called the discotheque of the Shekhinah, discotheque HaShekhinah, right? The plaza in front of the wall, in front of the Western Wall, will be renovated, and it will make it the largest discotheque in the state, and it will be called the discotheque of the Shekhinah. This will satisfy everyone. It will satisfy the secularists because it is a discotheque, so they'll all be very happy. They'll be able to come to the wall and have a discotheque. And it will satisfy the religionists because it is named after the Shekhinah. All the religionists care about is to get the name. You call it the discotheque of Shekhinah, they'll be happy. They don't care about what goes on in that discotheque, as long as it's called the discotheque of Shekhinah. It will serve as a sublime symbol of the unity of the nation. You're worried about the unity of the nation? Let's have discotheque of Shekhinah, the discotel, and it will serve as a sublime symbol of the unity of the nation. As represented by the coalition in the government, there was a coalition of the Mafdal, the religious Zionists, to Mapam, the socialists. So you had a coalition in the national government from the Mafdal to the Mapam, and in the government of the Jerusalem, from Mapai to Agudat Yisrael in Jerusalem, in the municipality. It will be a symbol of the atheistic clerical regime of the secular state, known in public, Yedua b'tzibur, as religious. Let's have this discotel. It'll make everybody happy and will be a great symbol of what Leibowitz considered to be the atheistic clerical regime, a regime run by atheists and clerical Jews who were representing, as it were, religion, but in Leibowitz's view, they were like kept mistresses of the atheistic government, of the secular state, which was a secular state known in public as religious, right? And that's the term for a common law wife, Yedua b'tzibur, as religious. Fine. Well, what is the problem with the territories? What is the problem with the conquests? And Leibowitz said the problem that we have to determine what to do with the areas conquered in the Six-Day War, it's not a question of territory. Territory is not the problem of holding on to this territory or not territory. The problem is the population of about 1.5 million in 1968, and today about 5 million people, Arabs, living there, over whom we must rule. Inclusion of these Arabs, says Leibowitz, under our rule will affect the liquidation of the state of Israel as the state of the Jewish people. If you want to have the state of Israel as the state of Jewish people, you have to have a Jewish majority. If you don't have a Jewish majority, you can't have a Jewish state. A state that rules over such a large hostile population will necessarily become a secret police state, right? Medinat Shin Bet, right? Leibowitz predicted, he's writing right after the Six-Day War, and he predicted that including all these Arabs who don't want our rule, under our rule, will affect the liquidation of the state of Israel. It will no longer be the state of Israel as we know it. It will no longer be the state of the Jewish people. A state that rules over such a large hostile population will necessarily become a secret police state, Medinat Shin Bet, with all that this entails for education, for free speech, and democratic institutions. Out of concern for the Jewish people and its state, here Leibowitz is saying he's going to recommend retreating, lehistalek, to get out of all the territories that were conquered. At the beginning he said to get out of all the territories that were conquered except for Jerusalem. To get out of all the territories that were conquered, not because of peace, because Leibowitz did not believe in the possibility of peace. He thought it would take generations before peace could be had with Israel's neighbors, and he was right about that. But in order to have a Jewish majority, in order to have a Jewish rule and not have to rule over people who don't want our rule and are going to fight us all the time, that would turn us into, he said, Medinat Shin Bet. A state that rules over such a large hostile population will necessarily become a secret police state, Medinat Shin Bet, with all that this entails for education, free speech, and democratic institutions. Out of concern for the Jewish people, and only out of concern for the Jewish people and its state, we have no choice but to withdraw. Again, he always used the term lehistalek, which is the vulgar term for let's just get out of there, let's get out of the territories. He doesn't use a nice word for withdraw like laseget, or which would be to withdraw. Laseget mean hashtachim. He doesn't say laseget mean hashtachim. He says lehistalek, to get out of the territories. And this, he says, is irrespective of the problem of peace. We should withdraw from the territories, not in a peace treaty, but just let's get out of there. Why? Because we don't want to have to rule over all these people who are going to be fighting us all the time and turning us into a Medinat Shin Bet and not letting us live as Jews in a majority Jewish state. Therefore, he says, let's just get out of there. This is irrespective of the problem of peace. Don't connect the problem of the territories with the problem of peace. Leibowitz did not think that there was a possibility to achieve peace in the near future, and therefore he said there's no point to try to make a peace treaty and to condition leaving the territories on the peace treaty. We're not leaving because it's good for them. We have to get out because it's good for us. The next thing. Now, what the halacha never envisioned, right? What could it be that the halacha has never envisioned? What the halacha never envisioned was the emergence of the state of Israel in real history. In the year 1948, unaccompanied by any theophany, the return of the Jews to the state of Israel was not done in some miraculous way with the third Beit HaMikdash, the third temple descending from heaven. The return was not done with some superhuman Mashiach, Messiah, coming to bring us back to the land and performing all kinds of great miracles. Halacha was not ready for a prosaic political act that would return us to the state, unaccompanied by any theophany. Religious thinking must make the transition from the fantasy of a hypothetical ideal state, right? When we Jews were in the diaspora, we had fantasies of what this ideal state is going to be. But now we have a real state, and we have to forget about all those fantasies, says Leibowitz, and we have to concentrate on the real state which we have, which was proclaimed in 1948, achieved independence for the Jewish people, without miracles, without divine revelation, without any clear message coming from God about what we're supposed to do, purely prosaic political event. Religious thinking must make the transition from the fantasy of a hypothetical ideal state to the realities of the state of Israel. It cannot do so without introducing innovation. Halacha is going to have to be bold. Halacha is going to have to be audacious. Halacha is going to have to confront the new situation of Jewish independence in the state of Israel. Authority for this audacious step inheres in the Torah itself. The Torah itself gives us the power to deal with the new problems created by the state. Concern for the Torah makes it obligatory. If you really are committed to the Torah, one is obligated to make bold moves in order to allow the Torah to confront the situation of Jewish independence. Whosoever believes that the Torah was given to us so that we may shape the life of this world under its direction. What are the Torah and mitzvot? The Torah and the mitzvot is for the real world, for the world we live in, which means for the world of Jewish independence. That's what the Torah and mitzvot are. They are meant for us to shape life in this world under the direction. And in the land of Israel, we have the power. We have the power to live in accordance with the Torah and mitzvot. In the Galut, in the diaspora, we didn't have the power. We were politically impotent. In the state of Israel, we Jews have the power to live life in this world, to shape the life of this world under the direction of the Torah and mitzvot, under its direction, the direction of the Torah. Whoever believes that this is what the Torah is, that it's a Torat Chaim, that it's a Torah of life, and was given to us so that we may shape the life of this world under its direction, must accept the responsibility of applying the Torah to society and to public life. Must accept the responsibility of creating a Torah which confronts Jewish independence and boldly enables the Torah to shape the life of this world. Now, at long last, with the establishment of the State of Israel, the Jewish religion will be put to the test. Nisayon. Here we come back to Leibowitz's main word, Nisayon. What is the State of Israel? It's a test. Are we going to be able to take Torah and mitzvot and turn it into a power that shapes the life of this world under its guidance, that enables us to set up a society in accordance with Torah and mitzvot? Are we going to boldly accept this nisayon, this trial, this test that we are put to, just as Abraham was put to a test? And here we see the heroic element in Leibowitz when he says, Yitgaber ka'ari, one has to get up in the morning for Avodat Hashem, to serve one's creator. Right? For Leibowitz, Torah and mitzvot is gvura. It's heroism. It's to turn the Torah into a way of life in this world, which directs and shapes our living in this world. If it is to be a Torah of life, Torat Chaim in the full sense of the word, will we enable the Torah to be a Torah of life in the full sense of the word? We've returned to the land of Israel. We have a challenge. We're being put to the test. We're being put to the nisayon. Will we be able to stand against this test? Will we be able to turn the Torah into a Torah of life? A Torah, not a Torah of Medinat Shin Bet, but a Torah of life, a Torah of mitzvot ma'asiyot. Will we be able to stand in this nisayon? Will we be able, like Abraham when he was tested in the Akedah, will we be able to have the power to, and the gvura and the might to stand this test when we are being put to the test of Jewish independence? Is it to be a Torah of life, a Torat Chaim in the full sense of the word? And then Leibowitz concludes, happy is the generation, Ashrei Hador Shezacha. And this is the Zionism of Leibowitz. This is the Zionism, even more so than Nimas Lanu Shilton HaGoyim. Why Nimas Lanu Shilton HaGoyim? Why are we fed up with the rule of the Gentiles? Because we want this political independence, which gives us the possibility of living under a Torat Chaim, a Torah of life. Happy is our generation, Ashrei Hador Shezacha, that we have merited, that we have been summoned to this greatest of all responsibilities. Why is our generation happy? Not because what God has given us, not because of miracles that God is doing for us, but because we have the opportunity to do the Torah and mitzvot in the land of Israel, to turn the Torah and mitzvot into a Torat Chaim. This is the nisayon. This is the test of Zionism. This is Leibowitz's Zionism. Zionism is a nisayon. It is a test of the Jewish people to see if we can take the Torah and the mitzvot and boldly turn them into a Torat Chaim in the full sense of the word, in an independent, powerful Jewish state. Ashrei Hador Shezacha. See, this is what makes Leibowitz happy, that he is here in the land of Israel. He's building his bridge on the Yarkon, not over the Mississippi. This is what makes him happy, that we are in the generation that has been summoned to this greatest of all responsibilities. Let me conclude with a quotation from my good friend and colleague, Avi Ravitsky, who summed up Leibowitz's views as follows. Leibowitz hitziv siman she'ela al kol davar. Leibowitz put a question mark on everything. Everything he put a question mark. Aval hu atzmo haya siman kriya. But he himself was an exclamation point. Thank you very much.